This is going to be the ultimate guide to overclocking a controller. I feel confident calling it the ultimate guide because every single video tutorial on YouTube, as well as a ton of information I've dug up from forums online, is all compiled into this video. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand what overclocking is and why it's important, how to do it yourself on a variety of controllers, and most importantly, how to measure the performance because the stats or numbers don't lie. So instead of just going off feel, being like, ooh, well, it feels a little quicker on my snap aiming and a little more response on the thumbsticks, you can actually pull up your results page in a notepad and show your friends, hey, check this out. I'm at 1 millisecond of input delay. On the table next to me, I have pulled out just a few controllers. I snagged a couple off the controller wall in the living room, some third-party controllers from AIM, Hex, Scuf, etc. And I also have a slew of OEM factory stock manufacturer controllers from Microsoft and Sony. Nintendo, you're going to get your own video because you don't play well with PC, at least the overclocking programs we're using. This will be a rather lengthy video for easy navigation. There is timestamps in the description of the video, which is also reflected on the timeline of the video, so you can jump around. However, if you are new to the concept of overclocking a controller, or you just want to be a controller aficionado and show all your controller playing friends what a big boy you are, I recommend watching the entire video. Run the intro, please. This is your controller captain. We've reached 6,900 feet. Go ahead and start flicking the sticks and mollywopping the back paddles. You don't like back paddles? How about those rear buttons? We've tested almost 100 custom and premium controllers, and we're only at the beginning. You need a thumbstick guide or tutorial on how to overclock your controller? Check out the controller playlist.
Bing bong.
Controller captain out. So first of all, what is overclocking a controller? Well, since a controller or gamepad is not the native input for a PC, a keyboard and mouse is, you are actually going to get more input delay or lag than you would on the native console that you're used to playing on. However, with the PC, you have the benefit of running programs like we're going to do today, where you can actually overclock, which is increasing the refresh rate or polling rate of your controller so it communicates with your PC faster, getting you as low as 1 millisecond or slightly under of input delay, which is much lower than you'll experience on a console. I am going to make a separate video for what the best connection method is for linking a controller to a PC. Is it wired? Is it Bluetooth 5.0? Is it a 2.4 gigahertz USB dongle? Is it the Microsoft adapter for Windows 10? You'd be pretty surprised, but that's not what this video is about. This is getting you up and running overclocking and measuring the performance. What are you going to need for this process? Well, a candidate controller, silly. We're overclocking a controller. You need one. Next up, you're going to need a cable to connect it to your PC. So whether that's USB-C, micro USB, or even mini USB, maybe you're rocking a PS3 controller, you're going to need a cable to tether to your PC. Now I'm going to show you how to get the 3 software programs or applications that you are going to need to overclock and also measure the performance. You are going to need DS4 Windows if you are going to be using a PlayStation 4 or 5 controller. What this does is spoofs Windows into thinking, hey, this is not a DualSense controller, this is an Xbox 360 controller, which allows us to measure our input delay. You will still be able to overclock a controller using the Lord of Mice program we're about to install, but you will not be able to measure the performance, so you'll have no actual proof that it worked unless you install DS4 Windows. Not to mention, DS4 Windows allows you to do a slew of other awesome things to a PlayStation 4 or 5 controller, and there will be a separate tutorial on that program alone. Now, when you Google DS4 Windows, you want this one right here. It is github.com by RioChan7. You do not want this DS4Windows.com one. And a lot of the DS4 Windows links that you will see are trying to get you to pay for some kind of a subscription program. That is not what you want. The DS4 Windows that we're using is absolutely free. Spend that money on games and whatever else you kids like to buy. So when you click on this URL, it will take you to this page here. As you can see, there's previous versions. However, the builds for DS4 Windows are pretty stable, so I would just go with the latest program, even if it has a little beta emblem or placard next to it. You're going to find the 64-bit zip file over here. Left click it, download it. It is a zip file. I would just save it to your desktop. Now, the actual overclocking program is from Lord of Mice, and this is on GitHub. I have ran virus checks and anti-malware scans on these programs, and they are absolutely clean. I'd lay with her and not think twice about it. She's clean as a whistle. These 3 software programs and this overclocking method has been used by hundreds of thousands of controller PC players with no issues. So you're fine. Now you're going to download this zip folder right here, the one that does not end in FN, but rather ends in f.zip. Go ahead and download that bad boy. It is a zip file. Go ahead and save it directly to your desktop. Now the program we're going to be using to measure our polling rate, our refresh rate, and our milliseconds of input delay is Xbox 360 controller polling rate checker, as the kids like to call it Xinput. You can see the latest build is right here. Click on latest version, look for the zip folder, left click it, go ahead and save it to the desktop. It's another zip file. Now that you have these 3 folders, I would recommend right-clicking and creating a new folder. We'll call this Controller Overclocking. Go ahead and right-click, extract files. Now, I would recommend installing WinRAR. It is free. I've heard some other people say you have to pay for WinRAR. You can find it for free very easily just by Googling WinRAR download. But if you don't want to use WinRAR, there are other extracting softwares. In fact, I think Windows 10 and 11 actually have baked in a software program that allows you to unzip zip files. And if it doesn't, it should, because there's a lot of compressed files on the internet. Right click, extract files. We're going to expand the desktop here, and whoa, we have our controller overclocking folder over here. Click OK. Now we have DS4 Windows and all of its program files inside of this controller overclocking folder. Let's do the same for the actual overclocking software. Now, if you want to extract this folder directly to the desktop, you can just right click and go extract here, and it will make a little folder with all the goodies in it, all the contents. Awesome. That made things look a little bit more sloppy. Let me help you navigate real quick. Driver over here is going to be the overclocking software. Every time you launch it, you are going to click on this setup.exe. Unfortunately, you have to run this initial setup every time you use it. You cannot pin it down here to the taskbar while it's running or anything like that, which is unfortunate, but as long as you have this little folder, you'll be able to get to it quickly and easily. DS4 Windows, I like that this is nicely kept in one folder, and this is the actual program right here, and you can actually pin this one because it is a authorized application. I mean, shoot, it's got Windows in the name, for God's sake. And then these programs right here for Xinput, you can actually delete the README files. It's not going to do anything negative for you. You do want to leave the sweet and low cert. And then over here, if you're on an 86 or 64-bit operating system, 99% of you are on a 64-bit operating system. Hey, you can check that. Go ahead and hit the Windows key on your keyboard, or come down here to the bottom left and click on Windows and type in about. As you can see, it populates about your PC. Hit enter. And as you can see, my operating system is a 64-bit build of Windows 10. So we're going to run all of our tests in 64-bit. Sweet. Now we can delete these zip folders. And this folder right here, unless you want it sitting out on your desktop, I'm quite a minimalist with my desktop. I don't like a lot of icons and stuff. I do have more up here on my second monitor, but I keep this one pretty free and clear for screen sharing tutorials like this video. So I'm going to go ahead and drag and drop this over here to OS and apps, which is my C drive, but not really. I'm just doing this for demonstration because guess what? I already have a folder over here called controller, so I can delete this. I was just showing y'all what to do. So we're going to get our trusty USB-C cable ready. I've got this little Velcro tie back on it. Keep in mind, you will get faster data transfer out of a USB 3.0 or 3.1 port versus a USB 2.0 port, which generally doesn't matter for peripherals such as keyboards, mice, controllers. However, as a scientific control for this testing, we are going to be plugging all of these controllers into the same USB 3.0 port on the front of my tower using the same USB-C cable. If they take micro USB, we'll be using the same cable for those, and using the exact same methods and programs to measure all of these controllers. Put that in your suck hole. Pop this in the USB-C port on the top of my controller. This is a licensed factory Xbox Series X controller, and you have a few options here. You're absolutely fine running the 1000 sample test. By running the 4000 sample version, you're not necessarily getting more data or more accurate data because it's simply waiting for 1000, 2000, or 4000 samples or inputs from the analog stick. But from what I've seen in my testing doing this exact process on over 80 controllers, there is virtually no deviation between 1000, 2000, and 4000 samples. Also an interesting thing, 2000 samples is noticed as a virus by my PC, but 1 and 4 is not. It just runs it with no questions asked. Ooh, that is gross. I'm seeing a lot of 7s in there, a couple of 3s. Not very consistent, I'll tell you that right now. Just keep going. Don't you stop. Don't you dare stop. So I'm just going in a circle here with the left stick. Now to run this test properly so you get accurate results, I have an Elite 2 over here just for example. You have to move the left analog stick in a circle. You want to keep a consistent speed, so if you started fast, keep going fast. If you started slow, keep going slow. Basically, any inputs on the left analog stick whatsoever will be registered as an input. And if you're on the 1000 sample, which I recommend you do so you don't die of exhaustion, the thumbstick needs to register 1000 inputs with the PC, which will happen faster than you think, especially once we overclock and the controller is communicating with the PC 1000 times a second or 1000 hertz. But a good technique so you don't get tired, fatigued, slow down, and then get some weird readings is just to take your palm and the controller like this and not only move your hand, but also with your right hand, move the controller itself back and forth like that. You might have a little bit of, I know it's kind of gross, but a little bit of dead skin on your left analog stick when you're done. You can just go ahead and wipe that off. No pain, no gain. Do you want a fast controller or not? So we're getting an average of 11 milliseconds, which tells me that this is at a 100 hertz polling rate, and that's because it is. So just some quick science so you can kind of understand how your polling rate or refresh rate with your PC correlates or relates to actual input lag or delay. Licensed Xbox controllers as well as third-party versions, so Scuf, AIM, Battle Beaver, as long as it's based on a licensed Microsoft controller, which all of these companies start with an OEM factory controller and then customize from there. They're going to be locked to one of these two polling rates. The most common one that I've seen, especially recently testing those two wired Nacon controllers, is a 250 hertz polling rate, which equates to about 4 milliseconds of input delay. We're going to see in this video overclocking some DualSense controllers to 1000 hertz, which equates to 1 second. Actually, I get around a 0.9 millisecond input delay. Now, if you want to get really in the weeds, there's things called micro stutters, which happen in between inputs, and this can cause slight deviations or fluctuations, but this is really in the weeds in advance and isn't going to add to the content or value of the video. You just want to learn how to overclock these bad boys. The lowest we got was a 3.6 milliseconds, and the highest we got was a 5,300 millisecond. Now, with your Lord of Mice controller overclocking folder, which I recommend you just name it something like controller overclocking or dang, this controller's fast, click on setup. And you have to do this each time you run the application. You can't pin it to the taskbar or anything, which is kind of unfortunate. If you're having any issues with these programs, I would recommend running as an administrator. In order to do that, right click on the program itself, click run as administrator, but that will just be a one-time fix. If you want to permanently make a program run as administrator, right click, go to properties, and then over here in the compatibility tab, click this box that says run this program as an administrator, click apply. And from now on, whenever you open that program, it will run as an administrator. However, it'll have a little pop-up box that pops up every time. Are you under duress? Are you sure you want to run this program as an administrator? Now, these are going to be your devices. This drop down over here, select all. And with licensed Microsoft controllers, they are recognized as an Xbox controller. As you can see, this is not currently overclocked. And how we know that is from these values over here. It is not being filtered. It's on a default polling rate, which is 100 hertz, and it's getting an estimated 4 milliseconds of input delay, but we actually saw it was substantially more than that. So to overclock a controller with this program, you are going to click on it, basically hover over the name, which in this case is Xbox controller, then click install service down here. Hit open. Then in this drop down that is labeled as default, select 1000. Hit install service again and open. Then click this filter on device box. Install service a third and final time. Hit open. Sometimes for good measure, I like to hit install service one more time. There we go. Now go ahead and unplug your controller and plug it back in. And as you can see, it is now being filtered at a 1000 hertz refresh or polling rate for an estimated 1 millisecond input lag or delay. I have some unfortunate news for you guys that like to play with Xbox controllers on PC. Xbox controllers are polling rate locked. They are hardware locked on the PCB or printed circuit board, so you can overclock them, and a lot of times you will notice a difference because it is getting a more consistent connection. It is not going to increase the polling rate, and thus it is not going to lower your milliseconds of input delay. It's unfortunate, I know, but we're going to test that theory right now. Let's go back to that polling rate checker. Not a goddamn bit of difference, as you can see. You hate to see it. You really genuinely do. I'm good with my thumbs. I could do this all day. I'm not even cramping up yet. So we're getting an average of 8 milliseconds, a minimum of 3, and a maximum of 4. So that maximum is substantially lower, and that is exactly what I was saying with consistency. Your minimum and maximum are going to be closer. Thus, it is going to be a smaller threshold, and it is going to give you more consistent inputs, which you will notice primarily on your thumbsticks when you are aiming. Pressing face buttons or rear paddles or buttons, you're not going to really notice it a whole hell of a lot. But when you are constantly aiming, moving that analog stick, thumbstick, joystick, whatever you want to call it, you will notice a difference. So despite the fact that you cannot technically overclock an Xbox controller because it is polling rate locked, I still recommend doing it because it does make it more consistent. You know what controllers do respond extremely well to being overclocked? Sony controllers. The PlayStation 4 DualShock 4 and the PlayStation 5 DualSense respond incredibly well to being overclocked. Now, if you go to Overclock and you get this pop-up window, this warning, I will have this video linked in the description below from a smaller content creator, Liquid, over here. I've never had this issue pop up, but if you do, this video will be linked down there in the description below. And he walks you through how to edit the application's registry. So our first contender for Team Blue, aka PlayStation, is going to be this DualSense controller. This one is in Backyard Barbecue Charcoal Black, and I have a feeling she's going to like getting overclocked. She's going to like it real good. Let's not disappoint her. And when you first plug in a PlayStation controller, you'll get this error saying there's no 360 controller connected. That's what this application is built for, and that's what we're going to make it think it's getting. We're going to go ahead and spoof our PC into thinking a DualSense controller is an Xbox 360 gamepad. Let's go ahead and close this out. Back in our controller folder over here, we are going to launch DS4 Windows, launch the application. And when you first pop it up, it will look like this. Click on the edit button over here, and as you can see, there is a slew of parameters, a ton of things you can adjust in this program, such as the dead zones for your thumbsticks if you need to calibrate calibrate for stick drift. You can even set the light bar to be a consistent color. Even make custom inputs for the touchpad. How about doing keyboard bindings for tilting your controller with the gyroscope? Again, a full in-depth tutorial of DS4 Windows will be coming in the near future. For now, we're concerned about this other tab over here. Not concerned, but this is where we're going to spend our time. Emulated controller, Xbox 360. Go ahead and hit apply over here. Now our PC is going to think that this DualSense controller is an Xbox 360 gamepad. Now down here at BT polling rate, this stands for Bluetooth polling rate, and you can actually overclock the Bluetooth performance of your controller. Default is going to be 250 Hz for an estimated 4 milliseconds of input delay. You can select either max or 1000 Hz, which will both get you around 1 millisecond of input delay wirelessly. Again, separate video coming soon comparing wireless versus wired connection. The performance gap is not what you think it would be. So this is just overclocking for Bluetooth, but in this video, we're going all wired, all tethered, and we're still going to overclock it using Lord of Mice's program. Now you have to leave DS4 connected and running in the background, or else it won't be spoofing your PC thinking that it's a 360 controller. So if you disconnect right now, it just won't work. Also in DS4 Windows, I've heard of some people trying to measure their input delay by hovering over the controller, and then you get a little pop-up here, which for me is indicating 0 milliseconds because this controller is overclocked. Technically, I'm getting about a 0.94 if you want to get real in the weeds, but this is not very accurate in comparison to the X input polling rate checker, which we're going to be using throughout this video. Go ahead and close this window down. Let's go back to our polling rate checker and run a 4000 sample. And now, as you can see, it says, hey, we're ready and willing, baby. Go ahead and flick that stick for me, because it thinks we have a 360 controller in our hand. So I'm going to go ahead and move this thumbstick around. And if I were a betting woman, I'd say we're probably going to get about 4 milliseconds of input delay with a 250 Hertz refresh rate. Just call it woman's intuition, call it spider sense, call it what you will. Yep, an average of 4.2. Now, I actually do recommend moving your analog stick in a circle continuously. Try not to stop because you will get some deviation in your testing, and that's just going to be operator error. Like right there, you saw one big number, one big input. That was me not moving the analog stick fast enough. Just keep it going. Don't you stop. Don't get tired. Keep pumping away. Stamina, important. So we're getting an average of 3.8 milliseconds and as low as 1.4. This is before an overclock. Now, granted, that max is a little bit high for what I like to see. Generally, these controllers are consistent enough to have a deviation of only 1 to 7 on the max end. Let's run one more. Sure, this is really good for the thumbsticks. Just, speeding up the stick drift problem. No big deal. We'll just pretend this has magnetic Hall effect sensors in the thumbsticks. Bam! That is consistency at its finest. Look at how tight that deviation is there. A minimum of 2.3 milliseconds and a max of 3.9. Average, 3.8. That's before an overclock. Let's overclock. So you're probably wondering, Kevin, I don't see a gamepad or controller on there. That's because it's a PlayStation controller, so it's not going to be labeled as an Xbox controller. What you are going to look for, open up the child name over here. This is the actual title of the devices. Don't know why they call it a child name, but hopefully you're caught up on your child support because Johnny needs a new pair of shoes and Sally needs braces. So we can filter these results by going over here to this dropdown and selecting HIDs or HIDs. And this is our controller right here. You're looking for this keyword, HID compliant game controller. If you have any doubt about that, go ahead and unplug the controller and that device disappeared. Let's plug it back in. Bam. HID compliant game controller. The title's much shorter this time. I'm not really sure what that's all about. There it goes. There. I knew it. I knew it. Yeah, fool me once. Screw you. Fool me twice. Fook on me. Is DS4 Windows still running its job on it? Let's see. Yep, that's hot. So same thing as last time. I'm just going to go through it a lot quicker this time. Install service. 1000. Filter on device. Install service. Unplug. Disappears, replug, being filtered at 1000 Hertz for an estimated 1 millisecond input delay. Let's test it. Oh, mama. I'm seeing a lot of zeros there. We are getting an average of 0.92 milliseconds, as low as 0.5 milliseconds, and the max we saw was a 2.8, which is acceptable. Let's run another, though. Also, the test completes a lot quicker because it's getting a lot more inputs as it is refreshing to the PC 1000 times. So that's even more consistent now, and we are still averaging 0.9. And that is why a lot of competitive controller players are running a PS4 or 5 controller versus an Xbox controller, because you can get the input delay in this realm. Disgusting. Now, I have heard whispers in the courtyard that people are saying setting a DualSense controller to 1000 Hertz is going to cause your PC to have anxiety and start popping Zoloft and going to counseling because it can't handle the sheer lightning fast speed of the input. That is a complete and utter wives' tale. However, I will caveat that just by saying that if you are running into any compatibility issues, or maybe some of your inputs aren't being registered in your game because your controller is so lickety split that your PC is having a panic attack, you can drop this down, but I would not recommend going any lower than 250. I would go go down to 500, see if that works, and then drop it down to 250. Do not go any lower than 250 or else the overclocking is just not doing anything for you. Let's try some third-party controllers and see if there's a difference. I always forget that this logo or emblem on the Xbox Elite controller is RGB. It's fading through the spectrum right now. If you're just using it on an Xbox One or Series console, you're always just going to see it illuminated white. But on PC, you can actually set the color of this bad boy or have it fading through the spectrum. This isn't modified or hacked or anything. Just a standard feature on the Series 2 controller, and my god, that looks sick. Well, this is an Elite controller, so it's got to have an Elite polling rate, right? No, built on the same PCB or printed circuit board as a regular Xbox controller. Ooh, there might be a couple of operator error deviations in there where I messed up a little bit. I wasn't really going against full lock on the outside of the... Okay, an average of 9 milliseconds. Ooh, 13 milliseconds. Oh god, that's got to be operator error. No way the controller could be that slow. Let's try it again. 12 milliseconds. My goodness gracious. Let's overclock it, see if she likes that. Okay, not overclocked as you can see. Let's fix that. Okay, she's now overclocked. Not a single bit of difference. It's almost like it's polling rate locked or something. Now, if you're having an issue when you're installing the Lord of Mice overclocking software where it simply won't recognize your devices, Kevin from the past is going to share a very thick, juicy tip with you that will remedy your issue. So one little workaround that I wish was mentioned in other YouTube tutorials and I didn't see it anywhere else. I had to dig through some forums to actually find this information. So I was having an issue where it let me select 1000, install the service, but as soon as I clicked this box for filter on device, it would pop up with a window saying this device might become unusable. If you do this, it would go completely red and it just would not recognize the device. It was basically unusable. So the way to get around this, restart your PC and press either F4 or F2 generally to get into your BIOS menu on your motherboard. And it's going to pop open the BIOS menu and then you are going to turn off safe boot, security tab, and then you are going to go to startup. You're going to disable secure boot. And that immediately fixed this problem. And I was a little worried. I was like, should I leave that on? That sounds kind of sketchy. Secure boot sounds important. I've done a ton of research on it and it seems it does no damage to have that off. I will be making a separate video for using Nintendo Switch controllers on PC because they are in a league of their own. They require different programs. They're not usable in DS4 Windows, which is for PlayStation controllers. A lot of times ReWAS doesn't even recognize them. Polling rate checker doesn't recognize it. So while it is recognized in the Lord of Mice overclocking software as a USB controller and you can't overclock it, if you can't measure the performance, what's the use? Because you can't actually prove that it made a difference in input delay or lag or delag. So separate video for the very, very few amount of players out there that like to use a Switch controller on PC. Generally, people go for PlayStation or Xbox controllers or third-party controllers, of course, but third-party controllers based on those two platforms. All right, we have a Scuf Reflex, which is a PlayStation Dualsense controller for PS5. Let's give it the business. So Xinput polling rate checker wasn't recognizing this controller, but of course with DS4 Windows, we've spoofed the PC into thinking this is an Xbox 360 gamepad. And on my first run, I'm getting a 0.9 millisecond input delay, which is crazy because this controller isn't overclocked yet. Unless I just overclocked this one back in the day and forgot about it or something. I guess I had overclocked this one in the past because it's already reflecting that it is overclocked. That would make sense why the input delay is so low. All right, we got a Scuf Instinct Pro over here. Let's give her the business. 10 milliseconds. Let's go ahead and overclock even though we know it doesn't do anything. Unplug, replug, overclocked. So it did go down a little bit. We're getting to 7.8 now as opposed to a 9. All right, we got the Hex Gaming Advanced over here. Let's see what she's made of. Give her a taste. 9 millis, 9.5 millis. She's consistently bad. 8 ms, not Microsoft, but milliseconds. All right, got the AIM DualSense controller over here, which by far is one of my favorite PS5 controllers. Haven't done too much PC play with it, but this is like my go-to on the PlayStation 5. I don't know why I had to specify that, like I'm talking about playing on a PS2 or anything. We're PS5. I know I never overclocked this controller. Maybe it's because we're running DS4. It's spoofing the overclocking program into thinking that it's the same DualSense controller plugged in because every DualSense I'm using so far, even ones I know for a fact I've never overclocked, are getting the same results of about 0.9 milliseconds, under 1 millisecond. Yeah, she's overclocked. Good golly, Miss Molly. DS4 is working its magic. Now, if you close down DS4 in the background, now it's not recognizing it. That's just weird. Now we got a factory OEM Sony DualShock 4 controller. In fact, it's still got the plastic wrap on the touch bar. I actually just unboxed this bad boy. Switch over to micro USB cable now that this doesn't have USB-C. Now this is the JDM2 version of a DualShock controller. The main giveaway is the fact that that LED bar is shown through the actual touchpad as opposed to just having the light bar on top. I did make a video in the past on the difference between the original and this revamp. Basically, the internals are slightly different, a little bit more durable. Cool, it's already recognizing it, thanks to DS4. Ooh. Oh, that is a hefty delay. Look at that. That's a big delay. My God. Ooh, that's a stinky delay. Also, these thumbsticks are so freaking short on the DualShock controller. My goodness gracious. Yeah, about 18 millisecond average. You can't see. Now you can. Yeah, that's rated for 20 milliseconds out of the box. That's stinky. Oh, this is going to benefit substantially from an overclock. There we go. That's what I like to see. So better, but still pretty damn slow. So not great results even fully overclocked. And the main reason for this is I just grabbed this controller out of the box, plugged it in and overclocked it. You do want to update your controller on your console to the latest firmware patch. So plug into your Xbox or PlayStation, update to the latest firmware, and you should get better results than this. Because PS4 controllers usually get pretty low as well, pretty close to the DualSense. Maybe I get a janky controller, who knows? Not a big deal for me because I hate the ergonomics of the DualShock 4 controller. So I wouldn't play with it on PC anyway, but some people love this controller. Usually you get better results than that with overclocking. Next up, we have a licensed Microsoft Xbox One controller. This one is Halo flavored, of course, and this is the original Xbox One controller. You can tell because it has this chin or lip that they did away with when the Xbox One S and X came out. Not series, but the One S and X. The naming convention over there at Microsoft is pretty gross. You know what else is going to be gross? The response time of this controller, because you can't overclock them. Let's get to it. So we're about to overclock this controller, and I know this isn't what this video is about, but real quick, look at how bad the dead zones and stick drift is on this controller, and then let's test the circularity. I have a feeling the average error is going to be pretty bad. Yeah, those are some accurate thumbsticks on this 8-year-old Xbox One controller. I will have a separate tutorial on what this program is, but all those red areas there mean this controller is not properly registering inputs in this region here, and your inputs are not being reflected properly. That's frustrating. Let's overclock this thing, yeah? It's actually a lot better than I expected. Let's run one more again. Okay, so we're getting around 11 milliseconds of delay, but the big problem with a non-overclocked Xbox controller is going to be the consistency. Look at how wide this deviation or spread is here. We have a minimum of 3.8 milliseconds and a maximum of damn near 4 seconds. And that doesn't mean, when you see that number there, that doesn't mean that you're going to press a button or aim the thumbsticks and it's going to take 4 seconds for it to register, because that is only one reading out of 1,000. So that reading there happens within a millisecond, but still, that's not a good number to see. That's too many digits there. Unlike your bank account, you want less numbers. Let's overclock this B word. So let this be proof right here that overclocking an Xbox controller does make a difference. It lowered the average input delay, granted only by about 2 milliseconds. However, that is measurable. But most importantly, that deviation between the minimum and maximum is a lot more consistent because there is less of a spread or gap there. As you see, we're now between 3 and 8, not whatever the heck it was earlier, which was massive. So you now know how to overclock a controller, why it's important, and how to measure the performance. So you have actual statistics and number-based proof as to the fact that it did work. We also learned that Xbox controllers are polling rate locked, so while it's not going to substantially lower your milliseconds of input delay, it does make a slight difference, and most importantly, it does make them more consistent. However, if you want the fastest experience playing controller on PC, I do recommend going with a PlayStation 5 Dualsense controller, which in my opinion is not a bad thing whatsoever, because the DualSense controller is ergonomically almost as comfortable as an Xbox One controller. Granted, you still have the symmetrical sticks, not the offset sticks, but substantially larger than the DualShock 4 controller, so it fits in most standard hands better. Also, there is a slew of aftermarket controllers for the DualSense, so if you want rear paddles or buttons, trigger locks, increased thumbstick sensitivity, there are a ton of companies out there such as Cinch, Evil, Battle Beaver, AIM, Scuf, and Mega Mods that make some really good DualSense controllers. I am going to be making a dedicated tier list going over all of the DualSense controllers that I have reviewed and ranking them based on 15 categories to figure out a winner. If this video was beneficial for you, I greatly would appreciate a like on the video. It helps it to get promoted by the Google algorithm, so this information can be discovered by more gamers and help them out as well. And it also helps me grow this little channel, which keeps me motivated to keep making videos and tutorials like this. If you enjoyed the video, liking it helps it to get seen by more gamers. This information will reach and assist them as well, which in turn helps me grow this little channel, which I do greatly appreciate. Subscribe for more content like this. I cover news in the gaming community and industry, tutorials helping you get set up streaming and YouTubing, as well as honest gaming product reviews, keyboards, mice, headsets, controllers, mics, chairs, etc. etc. There are some hefty exclusive discount codes found only in the description of my videos and only for the audience here at Gamer Heaven. Check out Into the AM for some of the sickest looking and most comfortable cloth to ever grace my gaming giblets. If you don't want to be scorching your corneas with harmful blue light, check out Gamer Advantage, the only blue light glasses on the market that look sexy and actually work. If you're looking for a custom controller that'll blow the competition's tits back, AIM definitively has the best bang for buck or price to performance when it comes to Xbox, PlayStation, and Switch controllers. Nope, they don't do Switch, but they do gaming mice. I said doo-doo. I have links to all my other platforms and socials in the description below. If you need a quick laugh or blast of gamer adrenaline, check my short form videos out at TikTok. To get in touch with myself and the stallions and stallionettes of Gamer Heaven, join the community Discord, and check me out at twitch.tv where I go live every other leap year on a blue moon if it falls into an odd calendar number, and my pH balance is on point. Just kidding, starting June I'm going to be live streaming a lot. Thanks for watching. This has been AK40 Kevin hosting Gamer Heaven, and I'll see you tomorrow because I upload daily. All the time. 60% of the time. Sometimes. Most of the time. Peace.